Well, it's always a treat to be with you folks. Just sense the presence of Jesus here, and a lot of people that love hanging around Jesus. Don't you love hanging around Jesus? So I'm here for a couple reasons. Number one, it's just great to be with you folks. Pam and I have a 50-year friendship. We worked in Young Life together many years ago when I was the area director. I drove by Inglemoor today and remembered we started a Young Life Club there in 1968. And a lot of kids have met Jesus because of that. But the second reason I'm here is because I love this guy. And we've kind of walked through life together. We're not together every month now, but we try to catch some time once or twice a year, and I just love him and being with him. And I can remember 50 years ago when he had a place in West Seattle, and we were both bachelors, dangerous bachelors. And he and I and Luke would be together. Luke was his German Shepherd dog, and he'd play his guitar, and we'd be there. And I think it was 1954 Fourth West, was it? Something like that. And I remember a number. Somebody said, "Gosh, Doug, that's great. You've got all the gifts that don't matter." But anyway, but it is a treat. I was thinking about the last couple Sundays. Last Sunday, I was with our 4 grown kids. They're 41, 39, 37, and 35 in the Bahamas, and we were celebrating our 45th wedding anniversary and my wife's 70th birthday, and in a couple of months my 75th. And our kids decided they wanted to go away. And by the way, we've got 16 grandkids. All four of them have 4, and we left the grandkids at home. Okay, we love them, but you know, when they're there, that's all you do is take care of them. So that was their idea, and they took us for 4 days to the Bahamas, and what a great time. First night, they had a DVD, about 45 minutes long, with pictures going back to the time we were born, and then 7 or 8 friends of Debbie's and of mine that got up and just talked about us, and it was such a gift. The week before, I was in Rio de Janeiro, and at Maranatha Church. By the way, 500,000 members. And it's a wonderful church. It really is so Jesus-centered. I was there, went to the church, and then went out to the airport and got on a plane for Moscow. And by the way, Moscow isn't on the way to Brazil, okay? There's about an 11-hour flight to Paris, and then 4 more to Moscow. And I get there, and the next morning early, I'm speaking at a prayer breakfast, and in Moscow. So, I love what I do. I'd like to say I don't have a job. I've got a calling. I don't, and I'd suggest this thought to you is, maybe I shared this when I was here before, but this little metaphor about the feeding of the 5,000, the only miracle in all 4 Gospels besides the resurrection. And I think Jesus is saying, Doug, and to each of us, bring all your time to me. Bring all your relationships to me. Bring all your possessions to me. Bring all your talents to me. Bring all your love to me. And I'll bless it. I'll break it. That's called sanctification. My wife's greatest prayer is I'd take my flesh love and give it to Jesus, and she gets love that's patient, kind, doesn't envy, doesn't boast, isn't proud, isn't rude, all those things, that we take those things, we give them to him, so he blesses them, he breaks them, he passes them out. There's enough for everybody and more left over, and we get to be part of the miracle. And that's what I'm trying to do these days, is just, I used to have time on and time off. Now I've just got time, and I'm trying to bring it to Jesus. And I find that he works in the most amazing ways. This morning I was driving over here, and a 34-year-old young woman who is I've been meeting with her for a number of years in the scriptures, and she isn't married. She fell in love a year ago to a wonderful guy who loves Christ, and he got cancer. And so she called me this morning. She lives in Renton, and she said, Doug, why do things like this happen? And I just said to her, I don't know, but I can promise you two things. Number one, he will not leave you or forsake you, and he's with Tim, her husband to be, every step of the way. He'll be with him, and also that he'll use it. What does Romans 8:28 say? All things work together for, didn't say all things are good. It says all things work together for good for those who love God. That he'll use it. That God never wastes anything. I'm thinking about my buddy Bill, and maybe the Lord just wanted to slow him down and have him not lift weights for a while, But it's not killing him, but, I think the Lord will use that. He never wastes anything. So I'm telling her that, and she's in tears, and I'm just reminding her about what I know is true. He's surely I am with you always, even to the end of the age. And he'll take that and he'll use it for good, as painful as it is. Well, this morning, I want to start out by sharing a little story. It's from a book called New Testament Christianity, written many years ago by J.B. Phillips. He's the guy that translated the New Testament, and Bill and I and a lot of ex-Young Life leaders love the Phillips translation and have used it. I've got it sitting in front of me here. My Bible's a little bit beat up, but it's surviving barely. But in this, he shares a story, and I want to start with that. It's an imaginary tour of the universe that God created, and a senior angel is taking a brand new angel, just a rookie, on a tour of this universe that God created. So they go from galaxy to galaxy to galaxy, and of course there's thousands and thousands of them. A galaxy is a collection of millions of stars, and so the day goes on, and they go from one to the other, and the brilliance and the beauty of all of it is breathtaking. And toward the end of the time, the senior angel says, I've got one more thing I want to show you. And so they get closer, and they get to a galaxy called the Milky Way. I think that's the one we're in, okay? And there's a lot of stars there, and one of the smaller stars, we call it the sun. And so he gets closer and closer, and he says, now look, you'll see rotating around that star that called the sun are some little orbs. We call them planets. Okay, so look, it's about 3 over from the star. There's a dirty colored little ball. I don't know if you're into climate change. I don't know. But I'll just say it's a little bit dirty. And it's 3 over there. And he pauses for a moment, just capturing the reverence of the moment. And he says, that is the visited planet. And the little rookie angel says, God went there? Yeah, he did. He sent the fullness of himself, his son Jesus. He spent 33 years with those people. He came in a manger that smelled like manure, and he left on a Roman cross nailed to it between 2 thieves, but rose again. That is the visited planet. And you think about that for a minute. We celebrated at Christmas. What an awesome thought. We used to do this in Young Life, Bill, right? We'd say to the kids, how do you know what God is like? Take a look at Jesus. the fullness of the Godhead. He shows us what God is like. So I want to take a minute just to reflect about Jesus, the fullness of God. We want to know what he's like. Take a look at Jesus. Remember H.G. Wells, the great British historian, died about 50 years ago. I love this. He says, I'm a historian. I'm not a believer. But I must confess, as a historian, that this penniless preacher from Nazareth is irrevocably the very center of history. Jesus Christ is easily the most dominant figure in all of history. So here's a guy who's not a believer, spent his life studying history, wrote volumes about it. Look what he says about Jesus. Then he says, is it any wonder that to this day, this Galilean is too much for our small hearts? Wow. And then finally he says, the doctrines of the kingdom of God, which was the main teaching of Jesus, is one of the most revolutionary doctrines that ever stirred and changed the human heart. Oh, I love that. And I think I read this to you before. This is another Brit, John Stott, but it's so good at this Christmas season, I want to read it again. It's called The Incomparable Jesus. More than 2,000 years ago, there was a man born contrary to the laws of nature. He laid aside his purple robe for a peasant's tunic. He was rich, yet for our sake he became poor. This man lived in poverty and was raised in obscurity. He received no formal education and never possessed wealth or widespread influence. He never traveled extensively. He seldom crossed the boundary of the country in which he lived. But this man's life has changed the course of history. In infancy, he startled the king. In childhood, he amazed religious scholars. In manhood, he ruled the course of nature, walked on stormy waves, hushed the raging sea to sleep. He healed multitudes without medicine and made no charge for his services. He never practiced psychiatry, but he has healed more broken hearts than all the doctors far and near. He never wrote a book, yet his life has inspired more books than any other man. He never wrote a song, yet he has furnished the theme for more songs than all the songwriters combined. And this morning we reveled in a few of those beautiful songs about Jesus. He never founded a college, but all the schools put together cannot boast of having as many students. He never marshaled an army. He never drafted a soldier or fired a gun. I love this. But no leader ever had more rebels surrender to him without a shot fired. Here. Herod could not kill him. Satan could not seduce him. His enemies could not destroy him. The grave could not hold him. After 3 days, he rose from the dead, alive forevermore. He is the ever-perfect one. He is the Christ, the Son of the living God. This man stands forth on the highest pinnacle of heavenly glory, proclaimed by God, acknowledged by angels, adored by his people, and feared by demons, as the risen Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Don't you love that? Just to ponder for a few minutes, Jesus, who he is. And I hope your Jesus, the one you've got. I hope he's getting bigger and bigger. Boy, mine is. The more I reflect and I travel the world and I meet him everywhere I go, in the faces of people in Tajikistan or Kazakhstan, some of you are involved there, or Uzbekistan or Armenia, Brazil, Paraguay, all over the world. One of my favorite Psalms is Psalm 24. The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, the world and all those that live in it. He's founded it upon the seas and established it upon the waters. Who shall ascend the hill of the Lord? Who will stand in his holy place? He that has clean hands and a pure heart does not lift up his soul to that which is false. He will receive blessing from the Lord and vindication from God our Savior. And then it ends up, lift up your heads, O you gates, and be lifted up, you ancient doors, that the King of glory will come in. Who is the King of glory? The Lord of hosts. He is the King of glory. And everywhere you go, all over the world, I meet him in new ways. What a joy. That's why it's fun not to have time on and time off. Just have time. See what he does with all that. But try that. It'll bless you. It really will. You know, I remember going to my 50th. I went to Roosevelt High School over here in Seattle. And you know, the interesting thing about your 50th is everybody's 68. You know, you don't have to ask anybody how old they are. They're all 68, right? And they have a little notebook that you put a few of the things you did. And I had my oldest son, John. He's an attorney in Gig Harbor. I said, John, does this sound religious? And he said, no. I said, good. But it was about Jesus and stuff. And I decided when I went, I wasn't going to tell anybody what I was doing. I just asked them what they were doing. So I did that all evening. Nobody asked me what I was doing. That's okay. I didn't come for that reason. But 7 or 8 times during the evening, somebody would come up to me and they'd go, hey, I met Jesus 10 years ago. He's changed my life. I go, great. About half of them were divorced. Most of them were bored and unhappy. I just thought, I'd love to tell them about Jesus because he's the only one that can heal the human heart. No religion can, no set of commandments can, only that person, Jesus. Okay, well, I want to read you a little passage, and it's in John 12. It's a kind of an obscure little thing, but let me give you the background. Before in John 12, the beginning, the woman that came and brought the pure nard and anointed Jesus' feet, remember, and Judas got upset about it because he was keeping the purse and he knew that was a lot of money. And then they had the parade into Jerusalem where they laid the palm branches down and everything for Jesus. And the Pharisees were there, and Lazarus was there. He'd been healed from the dead. And it says they wanted to kill Jesus and Lazarus. And think about it for a minute. These religious people, they were very religious, but Jesus just didn't fit in their box. So they wanted to kill him. So I'll pick it up here at John 12:17. And the people who had been with him when he summoned Lazarus from the grave and raised him from the dead were continually talking about it. This accounts for the crowd who went out to meet him, for they've heard that he'd given this sign. And seeing all this, the Pharisees remarked to one another, you see, there's nothing one can do. The whole world is coming after him. I like that. Among those who had come to worship at the festival were some Greeks. They approached Philip, whose hometown was Bethsaida in Galilee, with the request, Sir, we want to see Jesus. Don't you love that? And I find people all over the world are coming with that. We We've tried religion. We've tried all kinds of different things. We'd like to see Jesus. And Philip went and told Andrew, and Andrew went with Philip and told Jesus. And Jesus went to them. And Jesus told them, the time has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. I tell you that truly, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains a single grain of wheat. They didn't really understand what he was saying, but they would later, wouldn't they? But if it dies, it brings a good harvest. The man who loves his own life will lose it. The man who hates his life in this world will preserve it for eternal life. If a man wants to enter my service, he must follow my way. And where I am, my servant will also be. And my Father will honor every man who enters my service. You know, by the way, all of us have been called to enter his service. We may have different jobs, you know, but all of us are full-time, aren't we? We give all our time to him. Wherever we are and whatever we do, we bring it all to him. Now comes the hour of my heartbreak, he says, and what can I say? Father, save me from this hour? No, it was for this very purpose that I came to this hour. Father, honor your own name. And at this there came a voice from heaven. I have honored it, and I will honor it again. I love that passage. It gives me a glimpse not only of Jesus, but of his intimate relationship with the Father. And he knew what was ahead, and he would have just as soon not done it. But he did everything the Father told him to do, didn't he? So if you want to know what God's like, take a look at Jesus. What an excellent portrait of God's love he is. And the world yearns to know what God's like. So as we lift up Jesus in word and in action, we have a chance to show the world what he's like. I tell my kids, I had them memorize this verse early on, Galatians 2:20, for I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless, I live, but not I, but Christ lives in me. And the life I live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself up for me. 2 Sundays ago, I was in Rio. As I said, I went to the Maranatha Church, just had a wonderful time with those saints. You know, they speak Portuguese, but I could sense their spirit. It was all about Jesus. But the day before, I'd been in Brasilia, the capital, and they're wanting to have a prayer breakfast. And their new president, Bolsonaro, is a believer. He's a wonderful man. I had a chance to meet with a lot of his top leaders. They want to do a national prayer breakfast all about Jesus, and he's for it 100%. By the way, I would tell you, our president is too. Mr. Trump, he is all about it. He is thrilled by it. I don't understand some of the things he does, but I sure love a lot of the things he stands for. Like, you know, anti-abortion, things like that just break our hearts, okay? But the day before, after 5 days in Brasilia, meeting with people, we flew back to Rio. And somebody took me up, and I don't know, anybody ever been to Rio de Janeiro? It's a beautiful city. It's right on the ocean, and but they've got these mountains right in the middle of the city, and there's one of them called Sugarloaf Mountain. It's a great big thing. And so we went over there, and you get on this cable car, and it goes up, you know, and you get off, and you look all over Rio de Janeiro. You can see the whole thing, and if you've got the nerve, you can get on another cable car that goes all the way to the top. So we did. And we got up there, and man, we are really up in the air at this point. And then we turned around, and if you haven't ever been there, maybe you've seen this. There's a mountain above it called Corcovado. And there is a 38-meter-high statue of Christ. They call it Christ the Redeemer. And his arms are up like this over the city. And it was a sunny day that Saturday afternoon, and we sat there, my friend and I, for probably an hour and a half and just looked, at Jesus standing over that city with his arms outstretched. And I thought, wow, beautiful, nice, clear, sunny day. The next day, it was raining. Felt right at home as a former Seattleite, okay? And it was cloudy, and we're going over to the church, and I'm looking out of the car, and I can see up there in the mountain, but I can't see him. The clouds. This is a wonderful metaphor. The clouds have blocked him, but I know he's there. And then I look a few minutes later, and the clouds are parting, and I can just catch a glimpse of part of him. And then they come and they cover him again. And then a few minutes later, I can see him. And then the clouds cover him again. And I thought, what a fabulous metaphor that is for us. We know he's there, don't we? Sometimes the clouds block him off, but he's still there. I have kept that picture. And it was kind of neat. When I left, they gave me a gift. It's a wood carving, and it's got Sugarloaf, and it's actually got kind of a little cable. It's a little chain with a little thing for the place where the people are, And then above it, you've got Corcovado with Christ the Redeemer there. I stuck it on my desk just to remind me. Sometimes we can't see him, but we know. He's always there. And at the strangest moments, the clouds part, and we get a glimpse of him. One of my favorite verses is that one at the end of 2 Corinthians 3, where they're talking about Moses when he went up on the mountain, remember, and he came back and his face glowed, and he had to wear a veil, because people couldn't look at him, because he'd been with God. And so it says, and we all, with unveiled faces, as beholding the glory of the Lord, are being changed into his likeness from one degree of glory to another. This is the work of the Lord, who is the Spirit. Doesn't that say it all? So, folks, take with you Corcovado and Christ the Redeemer, because he's there. He's standing above all this impeachment chaos, all this stuff going on, this Ukrainian baloney. By the way, I go there 4 or 5 times a year, and they are laughing at us. They're going, there's nothing there. The president said there was nothing there, and I'm not trying to be political. I'm just saying we've got chaos going on, okay? Instead of praying for our president, a lot of people have just chosen to hate him. Who our president is, I'm praying for him because the Lord said to, right? So often it's chaos. So just keep in your mind, Corcovado, Christ the Redeemer, he's there. 24/7, 365. One more thing, and I can't remember if I did this with you before, but the end of the year is coming up, and I'm not into New Year's resolutions. I'm just into following Jesus. That's a full-time thing. But I would throw a thought out to you. Do you want your Jesus to get bigger? Well, I can give you a way that I guarantee it will happen, okay? I call it the 90-day challenge, okay? There's 28 chapters in Matthew, 16 in Mark, 24 in Luke, 21 in John. That totals up to 89. So, give yourself a Christmas present and start with Matthew 1 and read it 3 or 4 times, over and over, each time a little bit slower. And you've got your little notebook, and you write 2 things about Matthew 1. What did I learn about Jesus that I didn't know before? How he walks, how he talks, how he lives, how he loves. And secondly, how does it apply to my life? And then the next day you do Matthew 2. And you think about Matthew 1, that's all the begats, isn't it? You think, well, that'll be a throwaway. Not at all. You find out there were 14 generations from Adam to David, and then you find out 14 more. There's a plan here. There's something that God had in mind. It wasn't an accident. And as you ponder that and you read it over and over again, your Jesus, he gets bigger. The one you have, not the one at the right hand of the Father, the one you have. I just suggest that to you. I have a lot of young people I do that with, and one of the most fun things is to hear from them on email or Facebook, and they'll just go, Doug, I just finished day 90. Okay, and my Jesus got a lot bigger. He got a lot bigger. So I just suggest that to you. Give yourself a present. Take a half an hour a day and start with Matthew, a Jewish tax collector, writing about this Jewish carpenter. And then Mark, not one of the 12, but by the way, the first streaker. Remember him when they grabbed his garment and he ran away naked? That was Mark, okay? Probably wasn't his best moment, but anyway. Luke, a doctor, probably the most scholarly of them, writing about Jesus. And then finally John, one of the 12, one of the inner circle, wrote his gospel probably 60 years after Jesus died and rose again. But, a fabulous gospel, probably the most theological. All the I ams. I am the good shepherd. I am the way. I am the truth and the life. I am the resurrection. I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. All those I ams. And each gospel unique. Each one giving us a fresh glimpse of the majesty of Jesus. So I just suggest that to you. Give yourself a Christmas gift. Have your Jesus get bigger and bigger. Well, finally, one more thing. When our kids were little, you remember this, Bill and Terry, we used to have cassette recorders, and we'd have these little cassettes. And one of them was called The Birthday Party, and it was about Jesus and these little kids would sing things. And the one that and of course the kids, I don't even know if they listened to them, but we knew them all by heart. Of course, they play them over and over. And my favorite one was What Can I Give to the King? And I'd sing it to you, but I think I'd rather just say the words, okay? And it was a little kid's voice. And it was Christmas, and he wanted to give a special gift to the king. So he said, what can I give to the king? Give to the one who has everything. What can I give? What gift can I bring? What can I give to the king? What can I give to the king? There's a pause, and then the answer comes back, again, a child's voice. Give him a heart that's opened up wide. Give him a life that has nothing to hide. Give him a love that's tender and true. And he'll give it all back to you. Yes, he'll give it all back to you. And then it closes. What can I give to the king? Give to the one who has everything. Let's pray. Heavenly